I come at this with two different perspectives, one of which is an academic, and the other is as a practitioner. Think about the academic side. I've got a doctorate in leadership focused on leading multi-generational teams and understanding what one generation wants from their leaders to be truly effective versus another generation. Now, on the flip side, as a practitioner, I've been in sales for 30 years. For 15 years, I've been on the executive leadership team of different asset management and insurance companies, and I'm bringing both of those together. My experience plus research and all the different conversations that I've had with executives across the insurance and asset management space over the course of the last number of years to bring to you insights on effectively leading multi-generational teams. This is what my research kind of came together to define leadership. And in essence, it's this. It's about creating and communicating an effective vision that aligns with your organization. But most importantly, it's about empowering your team, empowering them to do more than they ever thought possible for not only themselves, their team, but also society. How many of you are University of Connecticut grads? I figure there's a couple here in Hartford. I am as well. And if you're not a UConn grad, maybe you're a fan of the UConn women's basketball program. Coach Gino Ariama, right? One of the most effective, arguably the effective coaches out there over the course of the last multiple decades. And what does he focus on? When you think about it from a leadership standpoint, he's got a very compelling vision when he goes to recruit new athletes and when he brings those athletes together to form a team. His vision is to be able to develop a program of excellence. I would argue he's done that over the last 25 years. But he does that through three things. The three pillars of success. One is setting high expectations. And so think about what he's done for the women on that program. He sets high expectations and expects them to meet it every day, regardless of how they feel. And the reality is, from a work standpoint, what can we do to set high expectations for ourselves and for our team? The second fundamental principle of success for Gino is this. It is about an unrelenting focus on the fundamentals. What about our roles? Do we focus on the fundamentals? Do we help our team focus on the fundamentals of what they do to be able to accomplish their task and their job really, really effectively? He's done a great job of managing and handling and focus on the fundamentals. The final piece is work ethic. From a work ethic standpoint, it's about consistency and persistency. Perfect practice makes perfect. But the reality is this. When you think of what Gino's been able to accomplish, it comes down to this. Great leaders create more leaders. He's been able to put 45 women in the WNBA since it started in 1997. He's also put a number of coaches, either head coach or assistant coaches, in D1 and D2 schools. Just a fantastic leader in the ability to be able to do that. But then the question then is, if that's what an effective leader looks like in sports, how do we bring that back to the work environment? As a leader, what I've done is actually sit down and had a quarterly meeting with my teammates. The opportunity is this, is to sit down and have not a conversation about their performance, not a conversation about a project, but a dedicated hour, one-on-one, face-to-face, to have a conversation about their career. And I started with this, and I asked, do me a favor, close your eyes. I want you to envision something for me. Envision your retirement. But I want you to envision your retirement party is really what I want you to envision. And as we sit there, and you're cutting your retirement cake at that party, I ask this question, what job are you retiring from? Because if I know what job you want to retire from, I can actually help you build a personal development plan to get to that job. The second, and I think probably even more important question to ask, is in that party that you're thinking about at retirement, you have a number of people that are extremely excited that you are retiring. Why? Because you have more time to spend on things that you are both passionate about. Maybe it's something in the community, maybe it's something in a congregation, or maybe it is family. But what I want to know is this. What are you passionate about? What is it that you worked between now and your retirement to be able to contribute even more back in your purpose in life? Because if I know what your purpose is, I can then build a personal development plan to help you not only from a individual standpoint from career, but also from a purpose in being able to give back to the community, or whatever that may be that you want to be able to spend time in retirement, to be able to spend that time. And the final of the top 3 is effective communication. Focusing on the why behind your communication. If you're making a difficult decision, or if you're just setting the strategy for the year, explaining the why behind that is so important. If you have, and you're trying to remove biases when recruiting, an industry that's done a fantastic job at this is orchestras. Now orchestras, they're hiring folks, if they're hiring a violinist, they'll have those that are evaluating here, they'll have a curtain, and on the other side of the curtain is the violinist. You can't see the violinist, you don't know anything about them, other than they start playing and you can hear it. By doing that, by having blind interviews, orchestras improved and increased the percentage of women by 50%, women going to the finals to be able to make it into the orchestra. What can we do? How can we as individuals make a huge impact on removing biases? Part of it is using personality assessments, job-related assessments, or behavioral assessments. And then also having a diverse panel as well. Having individuals from your team, but maybe a couple other teams across the organization to get their perspective on the individual candidates, to be able to find the best and most effective person to join your team. Baby boomers are looking for this. They want you to make tough decisions. They know you're gonna have to make it, but having a way to communicate the why behind it. Understanding why are you making that decision? How did you come up with that strategy? And how are you communicating it? Ask questions. Allow the baby boomer and the rest of the team to ask questions that push back on your why, but being able to defend and align the team towards where you're going. They're not always going to agree with the decisions you make, but if they understand the why behind it, they'll get behind it and they'll actually execute and have a much higher effective team that you can work towards the future.
Find your purpose and make sure that you understand your why. Because if you understand your why, you'll make those decisions faster. So if you're not happy with an individual relationship or you're not happy with a job, change it so that you're focused on yourself. If you go back, my story as an author, I think may be a little bit different than many authors. I started my journey towards where I am today as an author really as a reader, someone who was just an avid reader. Someone in the business community who had a growth mindset. And I've always said, how do I get better than I was yesterday? How do I improve upon what I'm doing? And over the course of a 30-year career in financial services, I worked with financial advisors and clients, and I was always curious. I was asking questions. What drives an individual to be successful in their careers? What drives them to pursue their own purpose and goals in life. And as I looked throughout the course of my career, I was also looking for books and pathways to learn. So I would reach out to leaders, read books that they recommended, Barnes and Noble. I also traveled a ton. So for those that are in airports a lot, Hudson News was a good friend of mine. Stop in and see what was the new book of choice that was being recommended. And my kind of pathway in reading was I liked the books of John Gordon, Energy Bus, little Jocko Willick's Extreme Ownership, Simon Sinek. In some of his stories. And really it was, to me, that mindset of understanding where I've got a story that was entertaining and then drove towards something I could actually implement in my own life, whether it's personal or professional. And that really drove me towards, where I ended up getting a doctorate in leadership and realizing that, like, as many folks have ever written a doctoral thesis, not a lot of people read them. And it's a lot of information. Mine's about 550 pages and a lot of data, a lot of insights. And I wanted to be able to relay that out to individuals so they could actually become more effective leaders. And so I took my mindset of reading, right? And how do I bring that into a story that others can enjoy, whether it's, for a personal, professional opportunity to say, here's a business fable that ideally for me, I wanted to write a book that you could pick up at Bradley Airport and fly down to Atlanta or Dallas, be able to finish the book and it be entertained, but also have some insights that you can actually use as a leader. And so that was kind of the inspiration to my story, if you will. For me, it was almost a journey that started in telling stories to the mass audience to then learn to write in academic format and then coming back to the mass audience. And I say that from the standpoint of over my career, I've always been in sales. So I was presenting and working with individual investors or financial advisors. So the mass audience of how do you, and we were looking at is retirement. And so telling stories and being able to bring anecdotes of how do you actually save today for retirement in the future and understand, what is it that an individual might need to do to understand the capital markets. And so that to me was kind of where I started. The challenge for me was as I started in a master's and then a doctorate was to learn how to write in that academic space. And it's much more challenging. There's more it's more data heavy. You have to do tremendous research on finding both sides of a story and being able to, understand one point of view, the counterpoint to it, and bring them to compare and contrast those. And that process to get a doctoral thesis took about 5 years, but it was a lot of writing, rewriting, and going into text heavy, to your point, data heavy insights. But then what I found was to come back to that story of being able to tell it in a way that resonated with individuals was to find it, going back to the anecdote again. And for me within Lead with Purpose, I had to find what was the story going to be based on? And it ended up being a softball coach. And that allowed me to bring it back down to the average individual who's, whether it's, within their community, within business, within their own personal business or Fortune 500 company, to be able to make a connection to the story that then brings out the core themes of the doctoral research as well.
So, yeah, I mean, you had to learn how to write for academia, then you had to unlearn it, right? In order to. That's
exactly right.
Together. I'm curious, 5 or so years for the doctoral thesis. How long did it take you to write Lead with Purpose?
Lead with Purpose. So if you think about what it took me to get to be able to even start writing it, the 5 years of the doctoral thesis, I look at as the precursor and the knowledge to be able to start the book itself. So that 5 years of research to understand does it truly take to be a highly effective leader. And then from there, it was when I first started putting pen to paper, I would say a little over 1 year from the point I started to the point where I had an actual copy in my hand, printed book. For me, it was a lot of research on understanding the different pathways of whether you go through a traditional publisher. I ended up going into a lot of conversations with McGraw-Hill, then going into some of the Greenleaf and kind of mid-size hybrid publishers. And then I finally decided to publish it on my own. But that in and of itself and the research of how can you publish a book was educational for me, but also to make the right decision of what am I using this book for? How do I want to get it out to market? And then to your point, now it's, as I've published it, it's about getting that message out and being able to get the story in front of as many folks as possible so that they can hear, you kind of one, read the book, but then also at the end of the day, my goal is to help others become better and more effective leaders. And that's really what's driven within the book. But you still, in order for that to happen, you still got to get it in front of more and more hands and more readers.
I want to come back to the objectives you have for the book in a moment, but I realize we really haven't told anybody what the story is about. So what can you share with us about Lead with Purpose?
Yeah, Lead with Purpose, and I'll tell you the story itself, and then the basis behind it. And so the story starts with the main character, Eddie. And Eddie is in aerospace, and he's a sales manager who is at work struggling to lead his team. He's got some issues with culture. He has some issues with accountability and driving. He's really struggling to get his team to be highly effective. At home, he's struggling with his family, struggling with his spouse and his daughter. And he's asked to actually coach his daughter's softball team. And so what happens is he decides to embark on this journey of coaching his daughter's softball team. And throughout the course of the book, he finds another mentor, a CEO who's a very highly successful business person and a state champion lacrosse coach. And this mentor gives him insights on how to lead not only at work, but also for his daughter's softball team. And through this story, it really he starts to implement effective behaviors and skills of highly effective leaders. And through that, he then becomes a better softball coach and a better leader, both in his personal life and at work. The entire story, as my wife says, it's a kind of an anecdote and a story about my own personal life, because it's I've been in sales leaders, and you always have a team that you want to do a little bit better. But I also I was inspired by coaching my own daughter's softball team as well. So it's kind of brings everything full circle.
And your daughter has a role in this book as well, doesn't she?
She does. She is an illustrator. And so somebody who's highly passionate about drawing, and she's been drawing for years. She loves softball. So she helped name the characters within the book, and is inspired about one of the characters. But she also drew one of the pictures in the book, which gave her, as a 13-year-old, someone who she can actually go forward in her life and say, she's a published illustrator, and being able to kind of hold herself out as doing something maybe not a lot of folks have an opportunity to do. And so it was fun to include her into it, and obviously brought the family closer, as well as she's got a true part in the book. I would say the best advice is to spend the time and find out what's appropriate for you, meaning, from a publisher's standpoint, is it going to a major publisher, a hybrid publisher, or self-publishing? And for me, looking at the overall cost and cost-benefit analysis is to look and truly think about being an independent publisher and publishing on your own. One, because you're going to have the ability to market on your own, the ability to really have true control of the book itself, and to own all the distribution of that book. And so, if I look at, how do you go about it? What's the best advice? One, tons of YouTube videos on how to go about the process, but spend the time on the publisher to understand which is the most appropriate and best option for yourself, and that you're going to get the best benefit from. My pathway was independent publishing, and I think that's probably the best for many publishers, or many authors. That is.